A brand new batch of Modern Horizons 2 leaks have just appeared, and I have to say, some of this stuff looks pretty crazy.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends, I hope the day finds you well. It's Friday. It's time to get ready to be moving into the weekend. There is a brand new batch of Modern Horizons 2 leaks that we have to take a look at today. However, in comparison to the previous batch of leaks that we talked about, these ones I feel like maybe a little bit more on the fence. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. So we're going to play a game called Real or Rumor. It's going to be up to you guys to decide, does this feel real? Does this feel like a rumor? You can let me know in the comments below. And I have some cards here that we can use as visual aids to talk a little bit about each of these different items, because there's a number of items on the list. Now, the first one is a pretty believable item on the list, and that is Dakin Blackblade, who we already know is going to be in Modern Horizons 2. I mean, I already did a video on it. The box art and everything like that, it matches up. And Wizards has made Modern Horizons 2 the place to bring old characters back. So, Dakin Blackblade being a part of Modern Horizons 2 is a foregone conclusion. So this may be included just to give the list, a bit of legitimacy. But Dakin's a planeswalker and will have old bordered treatment. I believe that 100% because we know Dakin's going to be in the set, and we've already seen the old border treatment for a number of cards. So, again, this feels very likely, but it's also low-hanging, easy fruit in terms of making a prediction, right? So for me, this one definitely falls into real. It's gonna be the case. They're going to have Dakin Blackblade as a planeswalker for Modern Horizons 2. He's literally a planeswalker. They want planeswalkers in each of their sets, so it's a gimme, right? That one's simple. So let's move on to the next item on the list, and this is our little visual representation here, Mr. Drudge Skeletons from the beginning of Magic. So the second item on the list is a black skeleton that makes copies of creatures that regenerate or something like that. That's literally what it says. It's somewhat vague. So, in the past, there have been a series of creatures that you basically tap them, discard a card, and then you get to make a token that is a copy of a pre-existing Magic card. So I'm envisioning this essentially. The idea behind this, I'm envisioning this as something that makes Drudge Skeletons, right? I mean, the wording is somewhat iffy. A black skeleton that makes copies of creatures that regenerate, that could be interpreted to be a black creature that will copy creatures in play that have regenerate. So this whole thing feels weird to me, but if it is going to be something that makes regenerators, I feel like 1/1 regenerating skeleton tokens makes perfect sense. And I gotta say, man, just looking at the old school artwork on Drudge Skeletons, it really holds up. You know what I mean? It's got some good artwork for something from back in the day. It's funky. That horse looks absolutely brutal. But this one to me falls a little bit more into the is it real category, because I'm of two minds about it, right? On one hand, yes, they've done creatures before that make these kind of tokens, that makes sense. But on the other hand, regeneration is something that Wizards of the Coast has kind of done away with, at least for standard sets going forwards. We've seen a lot of regeneration shifting into indestructibility instead, and that's because regeneration is more confusing to people, I think, than indestructibility. I'm not 100% sure why they discontinued regeneration, but regeneration's rules are a little bit more weird than indestructible. And regeneration has changed a number of times throughout the history of Magic the Gathering. I'm running into problems now where I'm playing the old school Chandelar game, which uses the original rules for regeneration, and sometimes my brain thinks the newer school rules for regeneration. Because under the old rules, you would regenerate when a creature got destroyed. But under the newer rules, you create a regeneration shield in advance. So with the old school rules, you wait until the creature dies to regenerate it, or is going to die to regenerate it. With the newer school rules, you have to preemptively set up a regeneration shield that goes off when the creature dies, which admittedly doesn't feel as much like regeneration. So maybe that's why they got rid of it as well, because the flavor doesn't 100% fit. So that moves this card into the category of, I'm not sure if this is really going to be real or rumor. I lean more towards it not being real, but we are talking about modern, and there are a ton of regenerating cards that already exist inside of modern. So there may be different rules for the construction of the Modern Horizon set versus the construction of a regular standard set, right? Now, the next item on the list is a legendary Naya dinosaur that tutors for another dinosaur. I didn't really think of any good visual examples to go with this other than just putting a dinosaur up on the screen. But I mean, you guys know what dinosaurs look like, so it's right? So it's Naya is white, red, green. And so you'd be getting a white, red, green dinosaur that tutors for another dinosaur. Now this actually makes a lot of sense as an include for Modern Horizons in terms of just adding some spice for random people. There are genuinely a bunch of dinosaur lovers who play Magic the Gathering. As far as I remember, there's literally like a Magic Dinosaur subreddit where all the posts are focused around dinosaurs in Magic the Gathering. And random cards from Ixalan involving dinosaurs actually are more valuable than I thought they would be. So there is more love for dinosaurs in Magic the Gathering than I had originally anticipated. And I guess I shouldn't really be surprised. I love gigantic smashy dinosaurs, so why wouldn't I think there'd be a bunch of other people? So the idea of a dinosaur kind of lord, like a legendary dinosaur that lets you go and get another dinosaur, that's cool. It's like, summon the dinosaurs, or whatever. I mean, that's not what you're going to call a creature, but I like that vibe. All right, what's next on the list? Ooh, next is Corelash. Okay, so Corelash is a legendary zombie warrior from back in the day. He's Corelash, heir to Blackblade. And you'll notice, we already talked about Dak and Blackblade. So Corelash is somebody, now we don't know how, he somehow ended up inheriting the Blackblade. Now, was that through some nefarious means? Does the sword have a will of its own? Can it find its way to people? It's an incredibly potent sword that has been used to slay and steal the souls from very powerful beings, including an elder dragon, right? So it's an incredibly powerful weapon, and it makes sense that if you're an individual who comes into possession of it, you're going to be specifically associated with that, right? He's not just Corelash, he's Corelash heir to Blackblade, because with a weapon like this, you're going to make a name for yourself. And Corelash was a really interesting card from Future Sight, where they tried this concept called Grandeur. And I actually really like Grandeur because it works great with legendary creatures. How it works is you discard another card with the exact same name for an effect. So Corelash, for example, if you already have a Corelash out, you can discard another Corelash from your hand, and then you search your library for up to 2 swamp cards and put them into play. So you're not stuck with essentially blank cards in your hand, which is a really nice little side sort of setup. Now, the Corelash being here, we don't know if it's literally going to be a new variation of Corelash, or if this Corelash is just getting reprinted, right? Both are theoretical possibilities, but no further information is given. And I have to say, this one feels more along the lines of real than rumor, simply because Dak and Blackblade is already in the set. We've seen the Blackblade show up here and there a little bit more frequently, right? So it's a great place to shove Corelash in and go, look, we have multiple wielders of the Blackblade. So I feel like that one leans more towards real, although admittedly, the entire series of these could all just be made up leaks for somebody's amusement. But hey, they're at least interesting enough that it's worth discussing in a video. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the one that I have to say I would be most excited about, and that would be Ashnod. All right, now we don't have a card for Ashnod, but Ashnod has been part of Magic the Gathering, like the lore and everything, for a very long time, going all the way back to the Brothers of War. And Ashnod is an interesting character because she's mostly evil. She's not a good person. She's got some aspects that actually kind of resonate with Phyrexia, but while she is self-serving and greedy, she's not purely evil. And there's this sort of interplay between her and Tanos that is pretty compelling. But she is a vicious, awful individual. She studied people's nerve systems to learn how to make a staff that can hack into their nerves and cause excruciating pain. Like, she does some really horrific things. And actually, up on the screen, I have the most horrific of, like, in my opinion, the most horrific thing that she was responsible for. And that is this transmogrification process where what you see in this gigantic vial vat here is a human being, right? Like, and you can see that it's locked shut, and the whole, like, just the positioning and the face and everything, it gives a real horror vibe to it. She's essentially taking humans, and basically this makes them much stronger, right? Like, this makes you a lot more powerful, but it strips away your humanity. And she ends up convincing a powerful warlord to allow her to start converting people into these monstrosities to make an army. And it's so horrific to think about this. I mean, I don't know how you could pickle a human and turn them into one of these monsters, but they're just shambling, soulless, dead-eyed beings. In the story, they're absolutely monstrous. So, Ashnod is genuinely a figure from Magic's history who totally needs to have her own Magic card, and I am looking forward to that being a reality. And I feel like this one feels more along the lines of real than rumor too, because according to what we've heard, Ashnod was actually slated for a previous set's release, but she got cut. So if they'd already designed Ashnod and she's kicking around waiting to go, then Modern Horizons 2 is a perfect place to go, yep, let's make her shine, right? I have to say, I'm a huge fan of these old legendary creatures finally getting to show up on Magic cards, right? I would love it if all of the main characters and sub-characters that we saw in all of the old school lore eventually get their own characters. That is dope to me. The next item we have on the list is this one. It says this. It says, Legendary Wall and Juggernaut the Goad's Walls attack as though. So here's how I read this, because again, I'm going to read it one more time to you. Maybe I read it too quickly. Legendary Wall and Juggernaut that goads wall attack as though. So this to me feels like it's actually talking about two separate cards. It's saying there's going to be a Legendary Wall and there's going to be a Juggernaut, and that the Juggernaut goads walls and has the ability walls attack as though they didn't have Defender. So the idea behind it is this is a creature that can't, like, normally the concept behind Juggernauts is they can't be blocked by walls. But what instead if you had a Juggernaut that somehow animated the walls and made them come forward? So it takes away walls' Defender ability, so it doesn't take it away, but it makes it so they can attack as if they didn't have Defender, and then goads them, which forces them to attack, because goad is target creature attacks during its controller's next attack step and attacks a player other than you. So this Juggernaut, if you were playing Commander specifically, would force other people's walls to attack basically everyone else's walls, maybe, or maybe it's a targeted ability and you have to target walls, but all walls have to attack and have to attack other players. I mean, I could see that because admittedly, walls aren't a very prolific sort of thing in Commander. I don't think there are a lot of people playing like hardcore wall decks. So something that makes all your opponent's walls attack all angrily is an interesting concept and doesn't feel overpowered. I don't know where I fall on the real or rumor one for this one though, because it's pretty out there, all right? The next card we have to talk about is a Fateful Hour white draw spell that fills your hand. So, I mean, we've talked a fair bit recently about how white is not really a super powerful color in Magic right now because they had, like, for a significant amount of time, they weren't really getting shown much love. Now, that has changed in recent times with white starting to get a little more beefy, starting to be able to do a little bit more. But for a long time, white didn't have much going on with it. So this could be another card intended to push white up a notch. And I mean, a card that fills up your hand is pretty impressive. So, I mean, I don't have any other details about that. I don't know if it's really going to turn out to be true. That one could go either way. The next one, here's another reference card, because we're going to be talking about Chains of Mephistopheles. I remember when this card came out in Legends, it baffled people. They were like, yo, what is going on here? And look at the artwork. You got the demon, but he just looks goofy, man. His horns are all like, his horns are funky and asymmetrical. And he's just like, hey, boys, what's up? Who wants to get chained up? You know, like it's just, he looks goofy, not intimidating. But you read the card and it says, every time a player draws a card, that player must first discard a card from his or her hand. If there are no cards in the player's hand, take the top card from the library, place it in the graveyard instead of drawing. This enchantment does not apply to the first card drawn by a player during the draw phase. So this is some really wonky wording, but basically how the card works is anytime anyone's going to draw a card other than the first card drawn each turn, they have to discard a card from their hand. Okay, so if you would draw a card past the first card you've drawn, instead discard a card. If you don't discard a card, you mill a card off the top of your deck. If you do have a card to discard, then you draw a card. So Chains of Mephistopheles is a very odd card, but it's also worth a ton of money. These things were rare in Legends, and they've always been very, very hard to come by. So it's a super valuable card. Now, it says here, the rumor is, a money card similar to Chains of Mephistopheles. So there are some people who will think to themselves, well, they can't do that because of the reserve list. But here's the thing. As long as they don't make the exact same card, they can make something incredibly similar and it doesn't violate the reserve list. We've actually seen that with the previous Modern Horizons, where they literally made a card that was almost identical to a pre-existing reserved list card. They just slapped fading onto it, right? So, or was it vanishing? I can't remember which is the more recent version. Whatever it is, they slapped that on there so that after 3 turns, the card would disappear. But other than that, it's the exact same thing. So they can make a Chains of Mephistopheles, and all they have to do is change the casting cost by 1 mana, slightly alter the ability, whatever it is, as long as it's not directly word for word the same card, then there's nothing to be done about it. And they can technically make a better Chains of Mephistopheles if they want to. They could make the same card for 1 black mana. Although I'm guessing they probably wouldn't give it the exact same wording. They would tweak it a little. But according to the way the reserve list works, as long as they're not making a functionally identical card, like literally functionally identical, then they haven't violated the reserve list. So you could have Chairs of Mephistopheles and have it have the exact same casting cost and ability, and that would be a violation. But if you have Chairs of Mephistopheles and you change one minor thing about the card, then you no longer have to worry about the reserve list in the same way. Although Wizards of the Coast does seem like they are kind of worried about like stepping on the toes of the reserve list too much. So I expect whatever they're making to be a somewhat strictly worse version, although it does say a money version, like a money card. So it's probably going to be significantly powerful. Now, this is a pretty random card to choose as like a rumor. You know what I mean? There's no logical reason to randomly pick Chains of Mephistopheles. And that actually makes me lean more towards this theoretically being real. Because they're not picking a card, they're not going crazy with it, right? They're not trying to pick some insanely powerful card that everybody's familiar with. They're picking a powerful card that is fairly obscure. I'm guessing a lot of people aren't that familiar with Chains of Mephistopheles, right? Like, it's a weird old, like really old school card. So them bringing this kind of ability into modern, I could see it happening. Then after that, we have a Trilobite Demon. I mean, okay. I look at that and go, all right, a Trilobite Demon. It's a demon and it's a Trilobite. There you go. You get what you get. I really don't have much to say about that. It's completely unexciting. And with just a creature type or whatever, real, rumor, who knows, who cares, really. Let's move on to the next item. A white card you can have any amount of. So right now, we have a red card you can have any amount of in your deck. We have blue card. Yep, we have the Persistent Petitioners, right? So there's red, there's blue. A black has multiple cards you can have any copies of in your deck with all the different rat types. So white doesn't have any card that you can have an endless amount of copies of yet. And I'm not sure if green does either. There may be one, but it's really not coming to me. And I feel like there isn't. So, you know what? Going through and making cards for each color that have that, you can play an unlimited amount of these. That's a good idea. I like that. That totally feels believable to me. And the thing about these cards that you can play any number of in your deck, they tend to be common and they tend to be valuable. Like, just the nature of them, because people need so many more if they're going to play with them, it tends to make it a value common or uncommon. And that's, Wizards of the Coast doesn't make a lot of valuable commons and uncommons, but they always want to have a few in each set. So I could see a white play with any number of this card fitting in. That, to me, I'm leaning towards real on. And then the final thing we have to talk about is a sliver concept that's quite interesting. And that is an Azorius sliver that functions without its tribe. And that's a weird idea, right? So by Azorius sliver, it means white-blue, like the crystalline sliver that we have here. Now, traditionally, slivers have abilities that transfer to other slivers. In recent times, Wizards of the Coast has changed slivers to only affect your slivers, which admittedly makes for a more enjoyable experience if you're up against other sliver decks, because you're not giving them your bonus. Who wants to share bonuses? I don't. So, crystalline sliver is just a visual example of what a white-blue sliver would look like. But in terms of the word choice, where it's a sliver that functions without its tribe. I mean, technically every sliver functions without its tribe. Like, the crystalline sliver can't be the target of spells or abilities. No sliver can while it's out. So it gains from its own ability. So I feel like the wording that they're using is indicating that this is some kind of sliver that doesn't care about other slivers. So maybe it grants abilities to non-slivers, or maybe it punishes non-slivers. Like, what if you had a sliver that said all non-slivers can't attack unless you pay 1 mana? Right? That has a white-blue feel to it, where you have to pay 1 mana with each non-sliver you want to attack with. So it functions without its tribe. It doesn't care about other slivers. Do you know what I mean? That's an idea right there. I'm not sure what they mean by it, but it's definitely interesting, and exploring the sliver space makes sense from the perspective of slivers are hugely popular. So they already did slivers in Modern Horizons 2. Why not try and push the boundaries into new unexplored areas? So, my friends, that wraps up the list of what is real, what is rumor. Let me know your thoughts below. What's real? What's rumor to you? Do you think the whole list is true? Do you think it's all malarkey? I don't think I've ever used that word in a video. Malarkey! What a fun word. Anyways, list of my top patrons scrolling on by. Come on over to my Hatcher channel, hang out, check out some Chandelar streams. We're having a great time. I've been doing a lot of streaming over there recently. So, if you want to hang out with me, come join me in the streams. Also, just watch them afterwards, because they're very enjoyable. All right? Thanks for being here, my friends. I will see you all next time.